Hi everyone and welcome to our webcast. My name's John Wellwood from 100% Effective Training. I'm the MD and CEO, and today I want to talk to you about 5 steps to successful business improvement. Before we do that, just one or two little admin things. Please type questions as we go through, but I'm going to try and answer them at the end so that we take no more than 30 minutes to do the presentation. It's a big subject, so I'm going to try and cover as much as I can in that time period, and then I'll answer as many questions as we can at the end. At the end, you'll be able to go and download a white paper with more details about what we're talking about. And we'll also give you a copy of this webinar so that you can see the slides and things if that's of interest once we've finished. If you're on Twitter or one of the social media things, then please follow along or join us for things that we send out regularly. We'd love to hear your comments as we go. 100% Effective have been doing business improvement for about 15 or 16 years since I started the business, and we're very passionate about trying to help businesses improve. We've been lucky enough to do it on 5 continents with lots of really big companies and some small companies as well, and we've been lucky enough to work across a whole series of industries. So we've got lots of experience of what works, what doesn't work, and how we can get best return on our investment of putting training consultancy in to try and improve your business. When we talk to these businesses around the world, we often get asked very similar questions when we talk about business improvement. People ask us things like, well, why should we do it? Will it be worth it? How do I start? Do I do a big bang and involve everybody in the business, or do we do it small and build up? What are the potential pitfalls we are going to experience as we go through implementing business improvement into our organization? How should we structure our organization so that we get the best out of it when we're doing our business improvement? Do we have to put in lovely new systems and things like that? And what will be the requirements to make it a success? Well, I'm going to try and talk about some of those as we go through the presentation today, but as you can appreciate, it's a very large subject. So today is really the start of us talking about business improvement. And what I want to give you is 5 steps about how we think you should implement business improvement into your organization. The first thing we need to realize is that all the businesses really need to change. We're all faced with very similar problems. Customers are becoming more and more demanding. They want more from us. They want it quicker. They want it cheaper. They want it with more bells and whistles on it. We're also getting competition from all around the world. So it almost doesn't matter what industry you're in now. You've got competition from all around the world. We're also getting resource constraints, we've got capacity constraints, etc., etc. Just about every business has very similar problems. And if we don't change and do things differently, then we're not going to survive. In my opinion, that means that we've all got to try and do something slightly different in our business. And if we can engage people in business improvement, then things will be so much better. The problem we have in most of our businesses is we're constantly firefighting. So we constantly see a problem, we run, we think we've solved that problem, we put the fire out, we breathe a sigh of relief, and then we go away and we then run to the next fire. The problem with putting fires out is a couple of months later, bing, 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 they come back again, and suddenly we've got another problem. So we're constantly running from one fire to the next. We never spend time putting those fires out and making sure that we solve the problem permanently. Business improvement is all about making sure we solve problems permanently and making sure that we do something about it. We also need to make sure that our businesses are set up so that everything we do is done in a standardized way. So we know how long something is going to take, we know what the outputs are going to be, we know if someone gives us something to do, we know exactly what they've done so that we can do our task as quickly as we possibly can. So we need to standardize all our processes across the entire business. We also need to get rid of black arts. So we may have a situation in your business where when 1 or 2 people go on holiday, suddenly we don't know how that particular thing is done, so we have to wait for them to come back. If they left the business, we'd be in real trouble because they're the only people who know how to do things. And businesses that have these kind of black arts or secret things are the ones where we have real problems, because that means we don't know how to plan, we don't know how to make sure we give good customer service, because there's only 1 or 2 individuals who can do it. So we need to change that. We need to put standardization in place. We need to get rid of these black arts. We also try and need to make sure that we don't make mistakes anymore. We don't do things twice. We don't scrap things. We don't rework, because it obviously adds on to all the cost within the business. So we need to get rid of that going forward. We also need to make sure that we know how long tasks take, how many people can do it, what the outputs are going to do, so that we can plan properly across the entire business. And if we can do that, then we can start doing things a little bit better and differently than we did before. We also need to try and get as many people in the business thinking about improving the business as we possibly can. So if you've got 100 people in, wouldn't it be nice to have 100 brains every day thinking about how we can make things better? Rather than what typically happens, one or two people at the top who think about it, or perhaps one or two business improvement people who's got it as their job to do it. What we're trying to do is get everybody in the business engaged in trying to make the business better. We also need to get everyone thinking about speaking with data. Anyone who's done anything in a Lean Six Sigma world knows that it's all about speaking with data. So if you've not got the data, it's just your opinion. We need to get everyone thinking about speaking with data, making decisions based on data. We also need to get rid of inconsistent customer service. Sometimes your customer service depends on who you actually get on the phone or who you're talking to face to face. If you get the good person, you get great customer service. If you don't, then you get poor customer service. We need to eliminate that, and we need to make our businesses standardized across the piece. If we can do all of that, what we get are fantastic results. Our performance gets better, our lead times get less, our costs go down, and effectively our business goes from strength to strength. If we can do all that, we get major benefits. We get external customers getting what they wanted when they wanted it, at the quality levels they wanted. Our internal customers suddenly get what they want, and they don't have to run around looking for things or asking questions or taking longer than they should. We can suddenly see that our lead times come down, our costs come down, our staff are happier, and all in all, the business just becomes a better place to work. So putting business improvement into your business can give us all of that. Now, we've worked with lots of companies around the world, as I mentioned, and some of them get this wrong. When they try and put business improvement in, they have some issues. The number one issue is typically the leadership in the business. The leadership in the business don't really know what they're signing up to. So they might go along and say, let's run a business improvement program or a lean program or a Six Sigma program, but they don't put the commitment in, they don't motivate people to try and do it, and therefore it typically fizzles out and dies. What we want to try and talk about is how do you make sure that that doesn't happen? They also end up communicating particularly badly. They tell one or two people what's going on, but they don't tell everybody. And then they wonder why everyone's not engaged, why everyone's not involved in what's going on. Other problems we see are people not being given any time for business improvement. And if you're not given any time, the likelihood is you're not going to do anything about it. If you're not measured on how to do business improvement, you're not going to do anything about it. We also see other people, when they ask us to come in and help them from business improvement, thinking that they can do it within 6 months. But this is a cultural change in the organization, so we need to plan it and think about it. If we can do that, then we've got a real chance of making a success. We need to make sure that we plan things properly, we motivate people properly, we put the right performance measures in place. And if we can do all that, then we've got a real chance of making business improvement stick in our business and dramatically changing things. We've developed a 5-stage model that we think is fairly logical, that if you follow it, you can make the business improvement in your business stick, make it effective even, and change the culture in your organization. So what I'd like to do for the rest of the time we're together is just talk you through our 5 stages. And if we do that and avoid the problems I've just spoken about, then we can really put some change into our business. So the first part of our model, if you like, is all about building the case for change. If we can make sure that every single senior manager in the business understands currently where they are, what their problems, what their issues are, they can understand what is possible in terms of how brilliant they could be, or how much they could reduce lead time, or how well they could make customer service, that would be fantastic. But we need to get them all on the same page. We need to get them the same understanding of what business improvement means, what it means to them, and what could be done, what could be possible. So we spend some time with people trying to help them do that. And by the end of that sort of first we've done a workshop, we've worked with the managers, they've got these kind of outputs. Every single manager has a very common understanding of what business improvement is. So they understand Lean, they understand Six Sigma, they understand Kaizen, etc., etc. So they're all starting from the same viewpoint. So they can then work out whether this is of use to their organization. They can then make sure that they understand their role and how important the senior manager's role is in trying to do any kind of cultural change or business improvement. Because if they don't buy into it wholeheartedly, then the chances are it won't succeed. So we need to make sure that they know what they're talking about in the first place, then they understand their role, and that they can then make a conscious decision whether this is something they think is good for their business, knowing all the expectations that are required, the time, the effort, and some of the money that's going to have to be spent to make this a success. If they can do that, then the next stage is where we get them to come together and be able to articulate their vision for the business. Now, I don't mean the business vision, I mean the business vision for business improvement. We can then get them all to buy into that, and then if all your senior managers are all thinking in the same way, we've got a real chance. So we need to make sure that they understand what the ultimate business looks like, how they're going to measure the success of this business improvement. Is it only going to be in monetary savings, or is it going to be in customer service? How are they going to measure individuals as well as the business itself? They need to be able to develop a strategy for how they're going to get this new business improvement strategy and vision to work. So they need the step-by-step goals of what they're going to try and do. They need to work out who's going to be involved in at what stage. So are we going to do one or two individuals, or are we going to do lots of people? How are we going to do that? How are we going to plan it? So we need clear milestones so that we can work out in the first 6 months we're going to do some pioneers, then we're going to do some more people, and then we're going to roll out to the whole organization. And if we're going to do that, who's going to be involved? What resources do we need to do? And probably more importantly, how are we going to free up some of those people's time so that they can actually run business improvement? We then need to think, how much is this going to cost us? Because although we'll get a fantastic return on investment from doing business improvement, there is some upfront cost. You need to train people, you need to set up some structures, which we'll talk about in a second. So we need to set that budget aside so that we can do it. We then need to kind of have an idea as a senior management team is, what behaviors will we expect people to behave like when we're doing these things? Will we have them doing a little bit of business improvement every day, or will we only ask one or two individuals? How will we ask people to behave to try and make that happen? And more importantly, how do we expect our senior managers to behave? So we need them to sort of walk the talk. We need them to engage and motivate and drive things through. If they don't do that, then the chances are, again, it's not going to be a success. If you're going to put in any kind of cultural change, you also need to think about what the barriers are going to be. So there might be one or two individuals who you need to spend a little bit more time with. There might be one or two individuals who will never change, and you need to do something a wee bit more dramatic with them. But we need to just think about what those barriers are and then have a plan to overcome them. So by the end of doing this, we have a situation where the senior managers have a common understanding of what's possible. They have a vision for how they're going to get there and what it's going to look like. They've identified the potential issues and they're going to do something about it. And they've thought about how they're going to engage all their staff in all this business improvement activity. So the first two stages are really all about getting the senior team on the same page with the same view, the same understanding of where we're going to. The third stage is the one where if we don't put the building blocks in place, then the house will come tumbling down. So the first two stages are all about strategy and vision. The third stage is about putting the structure in place. So quite often when we're helping companies with business improvement, they don't do anything with the senior managers to get them all on the same page. They don't have a vision of where they're trying to go. And actually, they don't put some of these structural aspects in place. They just say, tell you what, let's run a training program and hope for the best. We'd like that to be slightly different. So by structure, what do I mean? By structure, I mean we're going to have a slightly different way of looking at things. So I'm just going to share something else bear with me. Yeah. So We're going to have a structure in place where we can suddenly see that our factory or our office is set up for success. After getting a steering committee. So the steering committee is going to be typically the senior managers coming together on a monthly basis to drive the change in the business. So they need to try and work out what projects should be getting worked on based on the benefits to the business. They need to try and work out who are the appropriate people to work on these projects and how we're going to save them time. All right. If we can identify the right issues addressed to the strategy of the business, then we've got a real chance of making change. Too often we see business improvement programs where the projects and issues we've been asked to resolve are not linked to the strategy of the business. The result being that no one's really interested in the projects people are working on. If we can make sure that that's not the case, then everyone will be interested and everyone will want it to success. It's then a case of making sure that you select the right people to be especially your pioneers, the first people to do your business improvement. If we get them right, and they should be the enthusiastic people who have got the drive and determination to make it happen, then we've got a real chance of, again, being a success. If we don't, if we just pick people who've got nothing else to do, the likelihood is we're not going to get as good an output as we probably hoped. We then need to train and motivate our people to make sure that we're giving them the right skill sets. So we need to work out what our training program is going to be. How are we going to motivate them to complete projects and come up with ideas? And if we can do that, then we can solve these ideas permanently. So we need to think about our training. It's not just the technical aspects of business improvement we need to train them in, but we need to also train them in the behavioral aspects, how to present, how to motivate people, how to enthuse people, how to engage with people. Every single time we have a problem, we should identify who the sponsor of that particular problem is, typically a senior or middle manager who's going to try and take ownership of that problem, and they would get a business improvement person to help them. So that sponsor role is really important. We need to make sure those sponsors understand what their role is, how they can support their green or their black belts going forward, and how they can help smooth it all off if there are any issues. The secret for me of good sponsors is they've picked the problem that is applicable to them, so that they've got a real requirement to try and make that better, and therefore they're going to support their green or black belts going forward. We then need to think about how we're going to monitor our projects, how we're going to report progress on an ongoing basis so that everybody knows what's going on. And when we've done some fantastic activity, everybody knows we've done some fantastic activity. We need to effectively think about the internal PR for our business improvement program. And if we can do that, we suddenly get a situation where momentum and everyone gets involved with it to try and make it happen. In stage 3, we also need to think about, it's all very well and good us identifying our best people, training, but we need to think about how we're going to give time and ability to try and do something about it. So it's no good just saying and do it as an add-on to your business day. You need to give people time. So we need to work out how do we do that. Think about the key performance indicators for everybody in the business. So typically for me, if we're doing business improvement, your key performance indicators for everybody should change. And for me, every single person in a business should have business improvement as one of their aspects that they're measured on. So when you get to the end of the year and you do your appraisal, you should have your normal day-to-day activities. How did you perform on that? And then you should say, what have you done to make the business better? Show me the behavioral changes that you've helped. Show me the improvements you've made. Green and black belts have a real advantage here because they can actually prove that they've made things better in the business. With that, we might have to have slightly different roles. We might have to have different organizational structures. So we need to think about who reports to who, when they report to them, etc., to make it a success. Also means we need to put some governance in place. So if you're allowing someone 10% of their time to work on business improvement, you should continually work on business improvement in that time. How they report, when they do things, that all needs to be standardized as well to try and do it. We need to think about how we're going to motivate, how we're going to communicate, so we need to pull together plans to make that happen. We might even think about how we reward and recognize people. How do we sort of give people some thanks for what they've done? And that might be changing some of our HR processes and systems to make that a success. We need to think about how we document things so that we can share it with each other and show what we've done. We need to put some templates and standards in place so we're not reinventing the wheel every time we do something, so that we can continue. And then we need to look at our systems and procedures to make sure that they're essentially there to support business improvement going forward. If we can do all of that, then we've got a real chance of setting up and putting the building blocks in place to make it a success. And then we get all kinds of problems happening, and we end up with the failures that we talked about earlier on. Yeah. Bear with me 10 seconds. Once we've done that, we can look at what are the outputs from the stage. We've changed the way we look at people, what we do, how we motivate them, what we've done. We've changed our processes to make that a success, so that we're setting up the building blocks to make it happen. The business is set up so that, again, everything is done to make sure that our entire business improvement program is going to be successful. We've also set up the behavior in the business so that we've got people motivated, we've got the rules, we've got the regulations, and we've also got the behavioral aspects to make sure that going forward we always get what we require. Once we've done that, we need to think about the fourth stage, and the fourth stage is about running improvements. So typically we need to think about how are we going to do it? How are we going to select projects? How are we going to make these happen? Typically, I would suggest there are 3 types of project or improvement activities going forward. The first one is people will suggest improvements. They're quite simple. They're well-known area. They should just be getting on with them and doing them. Right? And as you get it right, you see more and more people doing this on a day-to-day basis. There'll be slightly more complex problems that are going to take a little bit more time, and they're going to require more analysis, and we would run them through a DMAIC project to try and make that happen. And then we might have some that are big problems, but actually we need them solved really quickly, and we would suggest you do them in a Kaizen way, again using DMAIC to follow that process through. So you've got 3 types of project. Those ones where you just get on with it, those ones which are linked to the strategy of the business and you would run as a DMAIC project, and those ones that need to be done really quickly, which you would do as a Kaizen. So you need to select how you're going to do it, who's going to do it, when they're going to do it, and put the structures in place to make that happen. So if you do all this, first of all, you've got your senior management all buying into it. They understand what they're trying to do. They've then created the vision so that they can articulate that to anyone about why they're doing it and what it's going to look like. You've then spent some time putting the structure in place so that it can be a success. And you've then thought about and started running some projects. So in stage 4, it's all about getting those projects up and running. We'd suggest picking some fairly simple ones to start with, but not ones that are so obvious that anyone could solve them, but not ones that are so big that it's world peace. So we need to do probably stage 3 and 4 in parallel to start with. But once we've done that, we get into the 5th and final phase, which is all about how we monitor and control and share the success of the projects going forward. So we need to put in some processes to track that and make sure that everyone knows what's happening. There are various things you can do. There's some computer systems out there that you can use, or you can just use some good old-fashioned communication. So we need to show the key performance indicators and how they're improving. We need to talk about the number of people who are engaged. We need to talk about how much money we've saved and that that's been signed off by the finance community. We then need to make sure all of that is monitored on a monthly basis at the steering committee to try and make it happen, and then to have some general internal PR and communication so that it goes forward and we're always telling people what's happening. If we do that, we've got a real chance of making it a success. So to follow the 5 stages, we would suggest that you follow the model we've talked about, get your senior management buying in, really do that. If you can get some early success, then there's nothing breeds success like success. So pick some good projects, get some people working on them, get some early wins, and then communicate it to everyone so everyone knows what's going on and try and motivate them to get engaged. Every senior manager in the business, for me, should be talking about business improvement all the time. So at the start of every meeting, the start of every time they get people together, they should be talking about how can this happen? How can we make things better? Make sure you're constantly looking at who else is involved in the business, how are they engaged or not engaged, and have a plan to try and do something about it. But for me, it's communication, communication, communication all the way through. Following that 5-stage model will make sure that we can get that success. We've written a lot more about this in a white paper, which you'll be able to download after this presentation. It will take you to a page where you can download it, and I've gone into a lot more detail to explain it. But for me, that 5-stage model is really important. If you can follow that 5-stage model, then you've got a real chance of changing the culture within your organization. I appreciate that this is a massive subject, and we've been talking for about 25 minutes about it, but there's a lot more things you can do. But for me, start thinking about it, put the plan in place, and you've got a real chance of success. Hopefully this has made some sense, and I've wondered if we've got any questions or anybody wants to ask anything. So someone's asked, can you tell me how long it takes to set up business improvement culture in an organization? I think that's a great question. And the thing for me is it depends on who the business are and what stage they are. But typically, it's going to take a year to 18 months to get things different. Any cultural change in the organization takes that kind of time. And if we don't have those kind of thought processes going forward, then the chances are that it won't be a success, because you need to change things so radically to try and make things happen. So 18 months would be my typical guess. If you're well down the line, then it might take a little bit less. If you've not done anything at all, it might take a little bit longer to try and do those kind of things. What other questions have we got? Bear with me while I have a little look here. What advice do you have for someone wanting to implement continuous improvement from the bottom up without top-level buy-in? Well, I think it's Craig, I think that's a great question, and it happens all the time. We constantly get people from the bottom. They know that it's a good thing to do business improvement. They want to get engaged and motivated and do all those kind of things, but unfortunately they don't get any support from up high. So my suggestion is to try and get them engaged in some way. So start by doing a project yourself. Try and get a little bit of success and show what you've done. So it's a very anti-British type thing to do, but you need to start crowing about your success and say, look, I used this DMAIC format or whatever it happens to be. I did this. Here's the success I did. It took me this amount of time. I got this return on investment. This is how I do it. And therefore, you would show that benefit and start that internal sort of PR, if you like, to try and do it. We're working with lots of companies just now where we've got middle to lower people working on projects, and they're doing a fantastic job, but they're not getting the engagement from up on high. So we've got them together. We've pulled together packages for them so that we can show what the brilliant story is, and then they're then using that to present it up further up in the organization. So I think it's about internal PR for me, and trying to show what could possibly be done. Next question, what are the best tools for identifying the best candidates for business improvement? That's a real tough question, Carl. I think for me, it's about looking at the skill sets of the people. So you want to identify, in effect, the best people in your organization to work on these projects. So how do you do that? Typically I've done it myself. I've gone round and said, who's the best person in your particular function? And they've said it's Jane. And I said, right, well, I'm going to have Jane for doing my business improvement. Now that gives us other problems because we need to backfill Jane and make sure Jane's job continues to be done. But if you can take your best people, that's one way of doing it, by identifying them. The key skills that I would look for in someone who's going to be a success are, number one, enthusiasm. Number two, that they want to do it, that they've got some credibility in the organization. If you can get someone who's got that kind of kudos, then that's great, because lots of the time they can get things done just by the power of their personalities, never mind anything else. You then need to look for someone who's going to kind of follow the rules or follow DMAIC without being shoved off that route by senior managers, because as we know, sometimes senior managers insist that we do things quicker than we should because they desperately want problems to be solved. So I want someone who's going to stand up to senior managers and say, no, I'm going to wait till I've collected the data or till I've identified the root cause, then I can do something about it. So that would be another thing that I would look for. And then probably lastly, someone who's got a little bit of analytical knowledge. So someone who can do the analysis, who can learn the tools and techniques. So the key skills for me: enthusiasm, motivation, some credibility in the organization, someone who can stand up to senior managers, and then someone who's got the ability to learn those tools and techniques would be someone who could be good at making business improvement happen. Next one we've got: where would you start in introducing Lean Six Sigma? Quick wins, full-blown DMAIC, or Kaizen events? Again, I think that depends on the organization. I think going for full-blown DMAIC, everybody doing it right across the organization, is a big challenge for most organizations, especially if they're quite large. If you're a 50, 100 person organization, then perhaps you could do that. But if you're bigger than that, then it'd be quite difficult. So for me, I would look for some quick wins. And again, if I had carte blanche to do what I would like, I think what I would do is I would run some quick win Kaizen events to prove that it works. I would follow DMAIC through that Kaizen event so that you're solving the problem, but I would make sure that it's a problem that can be solved within 3 to 5 days inside a Kaizen event. I would invite senior managers at the start, and I would invite senior managers at the end so that they can see the fantastic job that your team has done through that Kaizen event. And that way, I think you can show the quick wins, and therefore you can get the improvement to try and make that happen. What else we got? Why is Six Sigma such a taboo among Middle Eastern businesses? Have you had any experience dealing with local companies? I didn't know it was a taboo in the Middle East, to be brutally honest, Tony, but we have had quite a few companies in the Middle East do this, and we've had people fly over to London to many of our courses in hospitals and oil businesses to try and do it. I think Six Sigma is becoming a little bit more taboo generally rather than lean, because people are getting very pure about lean, Six Sigma, beg your pardon. So they're saying you've got to use all these statistical tools, you've got to follow this way, that way, the next way to make it happen. I would disagree with that. I think Lean Six Sigma and DMAIC as a structure is very sound, it's very logical, and I don't agree you have to use every tool every time. I think you pick the right tools at the right time. And if you do that, then it starts to get self-perpetuating and it works. If you want to go down that pure way and saying there's only one way to do it and you've got to do it this way because that's how GE or Motorola set it out to be done, then it starts to fail. And that might be why some people are now starting to say, you know what, I don't want to use Six Sigma. Personally, I think they should. You should use Lean Six Sigma, but use the tools that are appropriate. So we would, for instance, on our training courses, never teach people tools that we know they're never going to use, because that's a complete and utter waste of time. Lots of people go on training courses and they get taught every tool in the toolbox, most of which they're never going to use, and that becomes a turn-off to everyone. And that might be some of the reasons why it's becoming a bit taboo to try and do it. Next question Gary's got: how many champions would you need in an organization? What is the ratio? For me, if champions you mean the top senior managers, for me I would try and have them all if possible, but I think you definitely need about 50% of them to buy into this whole concept to start with. We do go to some organizations where we've been invited by one senior manager to come along, and we would run a champions training course for the senior team, and that's kind of convincing them, if you like, that this is a good thing to do. So the champions training is really critical from that. So I suppose to answer your question, Gary, one would be enough to start with. We've worked with one client in the UK where there was one champion, and that champion was the sponsor of every single one of the first 6 Greenbelt projects that happened. So effectively this guy did everything, And then he convinced the rest of his colleagues once he could show what the benefits were. So I don't know whether there's a ratio, but I think you certainly, the more the better to try and make that happen. We have a consulting group currently in our organization, and we are also have a group training in Six Sigma. How would you integrate the two? David, I think that's a good question. I think they should be integrated, and I think the best way to integrate them is not having the two labels. I think the consultants and training should be the same. I think consultants should be trainers and trainers should be consultants to be any good at your job, so that you can relate to people when you're passing on the knowledge. So perhaps the first thing I would do is get them all in a room together and say, what are we trying to achieve? What's your current role? What's your current role? And let's look at moving it forward. So I think that's what I would do, a kind of workshop with both groups based on the strategy of the business or the strategy for business improvement, get them together, and hopefully they can try and do things around that. It's what we got here. The next one, how about doing it on the shop floor? I think it's absolutely critical to do it on the shop floor. The more we can get everybody involved, the better. And typically guys and girls on the shop floor embrace this. Once you explain to them that it's about making their lives easier, not harder, once you explain to them that actually they'll give them something different to do, because rather than doing their normal everyday job, they can also do some business improvement. They get some variation. They're normally very engaged on the shop floor. Normally they've got all the solutions for most problems as well if we actually listen to them. So giving them the opportunity to run projects, to solve problems, and to come up with the solutions that they probably mentioned 10 or 20 times before, actually you get them engaged and then they come up with more ideas and more ideas. We're working with a company not so long ago, and the MD said, I know things are getting better. I don't know how, because we're not monitoring everything. All I know is every month the performance improvement, the business performance indicators get better and better and better. So he now knew that the culture had changed so that things were happening every single day, and they didn't have to report it to a manager. The shop floor just got on with it, and they did those kind of things to try and make that happen. I think I've covered all the questions, perhaps not. Let me just check. Someone also earlier on, I missed the question. What are the key skills required in business improvement? And I think for me, the key one, I think we mentioned this earlier on perhaps, is all about enthusiasm, analytical skills, making sure you stick to the rules, standing up to business improvement. But I think from a skill point of view, you need to be a very good presenter. You need to be good at facilitating and building a group together, because most business improvement is done by groups rather than individuals. So building a team, motivating a team, and then get into the detail where you can do the analysis. These are important skills for anyone in a business improvement world to try and make that happen. Excellent. Last question I've got here is, where do you see the crossover between Lean Six Sigma versus operational excellence? Again, I'm not hung up on the label of any of these things, and I think they're all very similar. I think operational excellence, business improvement, continuous improvement, I think that's all very similar to me. To try and make that happen. And Lean and Six Sigma are mechanisms to make that happen. So Lean, Six Sigma, business process reengineering, Kaizen, call it what you will, are all methodologies to improve a business. And that's why I said in the 5 stages, one of the things you should work out is what you're going to call it, how are you going to do it, what it's going to look like to me. So we've got some clients that will call it operational excellence. We've got others who will call it business improvement. We've got other ones that might call it George. It doesn't really matter. It's about designing it for your organization and then using the appropriate tools and techniques that will help you. In my opinion, DMAIC is the best way to do it, and then learn as many tools as you possibly can to try and make that happen. What else we got? Is there anywhere we can continue this discussion after? Will there be LinkedIn, Twitter? Yes, we will. We're going to have all kinds of things on our Twitter account, so please sign in and see what we've got to say. I'll answer more questions there if I can. And our LinkedIn group, we'd love to start as many discussions as we possibly can, so please go there and have a look. So I think that's us for our time. I think we did it about 40 minutes or so, so that worked about time, half an hour for the presentation, 10 minutes for questions. Thank you very much indeed for your attention, and hopefully you'll join us for another one of these very soon. Thanks very much.